This is the Garden of English. I'm Tim Freitas. You're writing a poetry essay pretty soon for an AP exam. I've got tips for that, and I've got a friend with great tips for that. So we are going to talk about these tips together. All right, folks, I am here with a very good friend of mine named Susan Barber. Yes, the Susan Barber. I don't know how we actually got her to agree to come on the Garden of English, but we did. I will let her talk about herself, though. But we are super grateful that she is indeed here. Before we get into our tips for today, though, I would like to always thank the Patreon supporters for the Garden of English. You will see their names right in the middle of the screen. That list is growing. I'm going to have to probably double column this pretty soon or something, but we appreciate what is being offered to support us here so we can make videos like this and get people like Susan on our channel. On top of that, if you're interested in actually supporting the Garden of English in that way, you can look up in the top left-hand corner of the video here, and there's a video that says, hey, here are the benefits of actually, or the perks that I will offer and can offer if you actually work to support the Garden of English in that way through Patreon. So super grateful for our Patreon supporters. But now that we've covered that, I'm going to let Susan introduce us to herself. Susan, tell us about you.
Hey everybody, I'm Susan Barber from Atlanta, Georgia, Grady High School. Shout out to all the Grady Knights. I've known Tim for a long time, watched his work from afar, but really last summer when Tim and I worked on Mosaic together, that's how we got to know each other. So I am
to
really
be clear,
excited.
when I saw you on the Mosaic committee, I was like, oh my word, I am with royalty right now. It
Stop
was one of those things. So please note, I've been watching from afar in awe for so long, and then I was like, oh, the Susan Barber, how cool is that, right? All
So,
right.
so now we're paired up, right?
Yep.
And that's super fun.
Yes.
Doing this video and doing Mosaic stuff, and it's good to team up and work together. Love it, love it, love it. So thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be here and just to talk about poetry writing.
Right, there we go. Right, our tips before exam day, because exam day is coming up, right? So we're going to go through 4 tips here for reading and writing the poetry response, okay? And, we might as well just get right into it. So, all right, Susan, take it away. What's tip number 1?
So tip number 1, I think it's interesting that students tend to approach the poetry essay probably with the most trepidation.
Absolutely.
They're like, poetry, I'm not good at poetry. Even if you are good at poetry, you just have this mindset of, I don't have enough experience with poetry and I'm not good at poetry and I'm not going to understand it. Poets talk in this cryptic language that I don't understand. So tip number 1 is when you read the poem, I don't want you to get hung up on the things that you don't understand in the poem, but really lean into what you do understand. All of us are going to enter a poem at a different place.
Absolutely.
I may read a poem and really connect with something on line 10, and Tim may read it and really connect with something on line 2. We bring different experiences. We bring different amounts of just reading knowledge with us. So we're all going to connect differently. So you lean into where you are connecting with the poem and you go with that. So you want to think about the prompt and put these glasses on, let the prompt be your lens through how you're reading it. So if I'm thinking about a speaker's complex attitude toward the subject of a frog or the juggler or whatever that I'm going to be reading about, now I'm going to read that poem and everything that stands out about whatever topic that I need to be writing on. That's what I want to think about. And if there's stuff that I don't understand, that's okay. It's okay.
Work with what you know instead of what you don't. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I also, I'm happy you mentioned the prompt, because I have my kids break down the prompt and make a question when it gets to the very end, when it talks about the complex something. There will always be a complex something. And so my kids create a what question, and they say, okay, so what is the complex conflict, or what is the complex narration, or what is the complex or narrator, or the complex character, or the complex attitude? And then my kids will ask that question, and that's the focus of their reading. I'm like, okay, you need to focus on the layers of attitude that are seen here. That's all you need to read for. And if you focus on what you know and not what you don't, you'll be in fine shape. Now, just real quick, if anybody wants to know how I get kids to actually break down their prompts to get that focus for them, you can actually check out the playlist that I'm going to link up in the corner up there that I'll probably refer to throughout our video, because I have broken all of that down in steps in different videos with templates and things like that too. But yeah, focus on what you know, not what you don't. I remember a few years ago they had this poem on the exam where like this toad was like having this like existential moment, right? Reflecting on where it was in the pool. And, you know, just reading it, I remember when I read it for the first time, I was like, so I know that there's like a frog in a pool or something. And I was like, that's kind of where I'm at, right? And sure enough, if that's where I'm at, then that's what I got to go with, because it's going to be my best shot. Right.
Right. And we are not going to be able to decode an entire poem in 40 minutes.
Right. No chance.
Truth be told, like there are poems, every time I read Fire and Ice by Robert Frost, which I love, short little poem. I've read it, I don't know how many times, dozens upon dozens upon dozens. And every time I read it, I'm like, I still have questions. Like we are not going to crack the whole poem in one setting. So that is okay. Go ahead and release yourself from that mindset.
Right.
Just focus on what you understand, lean into that, go with that.
Right. And one more thing before we get to tip number 2 is this, right? When you talked about writing about what you know as opposed to what you don't, and accessing what you know and what you don't, when you're thinking about a poem, like let's say you know that you saw some alliteration, but you also know that you're trying to explore the complex conflict or the complex attitude of the narrator, of the speaker. Folks, if you don't know how the alliteration connects to the complex attitude, don't write about that. Right? You can know both things. Here's the complex attitude. This person is, reluctant to do something. And then you see alliteration and you're like, alliteration, reluctant to do something. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't connect, don't talk about that. So work with what you know, not what you don't. I think that is great advice for evidence number 1. So what's tip number 2?
Okay. Tip number 2, a phrase that you and I like to say, shift happens.
That's right.
We want to always be looking for shifts when we're reading, because shifts are going to help us to form insights about the topic that we're wanting to explore. Right. So you may have shifts like when you read a poem, there may be shifts in time, there may be shifts in perspective, there may be shifts in like the speaker's attitude, in tone, all types of shifts to look for. And that helps us to chunk the poem into smaller parts to think about. And then we can develop insights around these different shifts. And magically, then we have a line of reasoning already established when we're thinking about shifts and insights. That just gives us a way to logically organize our writing.
Right, especially if we read through these things. If we write through the poem chronologically, what just popped into my mind was the poem "A Story" by Lee Young Lee a few years ago, right? And as the character, as the father, right, as his anxiety builds, you can clearly see the building of the stanza. Right, and then it comes to the crescendo, but also he shifts. The father was in the present with the son, and then he shifts to the future. And like if you can notice these little shifts, now all of a sudden we can really start seeing the complexity of their relationship. The kids in the here and now, the dad's moving to the future. The dad's moving to the future because of his building anxiety, which is much like the stanzas that are building as well. And now all of a sudden this is all coming together because we're focusing on the shifts that show up there. So I also, not only do I say shift happens, right? By the way, if anybody doesn't know this, the Garden of English has an awesome poster for that, by the way. But
I just found out about that. So.
Remind me and I'll send you the file before we leave. But the other thing too is I also say good authors give a shift, right? So one of those two things happens, right? And I hope that an administrator walks by my classroom as I say that super loud when I'm teaching poetry, but it's those shifts that then also can help create your topic sentences. So when you notice the shift, you say, okay, what do I know about the attitude or about the conflict? And then each one of those shifts is a new topic sentence. Now, if you notice 25 shifts, we've only got 40 minutes to write the paper. Work with the ones that are easiest for you, right? The 2 or 3 that are going to be easiest. But shift happens. Love the idea. Super awesome. All right. Tip number 3. What are we thinking?
Okay. Tip number 3 is we really need to be able to zoom in and zoom out when we're thinking about a poem and when we're thinking about writing. So by zoom in, I mean, let's look at really specific words and phrases instead of just pulling out like 2 or 3 lines of a poem and dropping that in and then dealing with, analyzing those 2 or 3 lines as one unit. Let's think about specific words and phrases, because that really allows us to take our analysis very deep and look at the nuanced meanings of words and phrases. So we really want to zoom in and look at specific words and phrases. I tell my students, really, quotes, like, they should be less than 9 words.
Yes, exactly.
Like, if it's more than that, like, it's too much analysis to handle in one chunk.
And you know what? When I have my kids provide commentary, I make them actually take out chunks from what they put in for textual evidence. So they'll put in the 7 words of textual evidence, and I'll be like, good, now we have to circle the different parts of that text and pull that down. So it'll be like, all right, I think about that poem from a few years ago, For That He Looked Out Upon Her, where it talks about that guy who's like wanting to look at this woman that he thinks is a fly honey, but knows that he doesn't want to because he doesn't want to get hurt again.
Right.
And they'll put in, they'll talk about the comparison between the mouse and the trap. But if they don't focus on that word seldomly enticed again, that word seldom is so important. So I'll tell the kids, give me the analysis of the mouse in the trap. Doesn't want to get hurt again, and he feels like he has been hurt. And then focus in on the word seldom in there, which shows that he knows that he might actually go back. And that's why this is so complex for him as he goes through there. Because if the kids get the initial metaphor of, hey, he doesn't want to get hurt again, that's fine. They can still score fine on the paper. But to really get in there, they have to find that word seldom. And so because of that, we have to focus in on that.
And that's where you really get your, like I said, your nuanced sophistication. Everybody's all about the sophistication point. And if you want to pick up that sophistication point, you're really going to have to look at these specific words and phrases and not just unpacking this 4-line metaphor of mouse. You're going to have to zero in on seldom. You're going to have to zero in on the metaphor about the fly, and it comes back and it says, well, hardly come again to play.
Right, so that implies that he might come again, and that's why he's got to look down. Right. And a lot of kids will notice, like, hey, he feels like he's going to get hurt again, and that's all well and good, and that's a fine commentary on the poem, but to get that sophistication, we got to get in there. So I think what that also seems to tell us here, Susan, is that when we provide that commentary, especially nuanced commentary, we're really looking to talk about word and phrase connotations. And that's the emotional baggage that's tied to, and the implications that are tied to those words. And that's how you're going to provide the best commentary, it seems like.
Correct. So we zoom in, but then we have to zoom out, and we have to talk about how these specific words and phrases help us establish an interpretation of the poem, or how they connect to a central and controlling idea. So it's both looking small, but then how do these one little words like seldom and hardly, how does that create, how does that add a different layer of meaning to the overall idea?
And that's really important. And so what I do, just so you know, is I actually give my kids topic sentence templates that force them to put the concrete in it and the abstract. So let's pretend we were using the For That He Looked Out Upon Her poem, which anybody can go look up just by typing it into an internet search, right? My students would say something along the lines of, the speaker then moves to compare himself with a vermin, in order to highlight how he's reluctant to actually look at this woman again because of the pain that he's experienced, but also his knowingness, his self-awareness that he wants to actually look at her again. And now we see that complexity right there. He knows he's going to get hurt, but he knows he's self-aware enough to know that he might be enticed again. And that right there in the topic sentence, then they put the textual evidence in and they explain, how does this metaphor show that he's going to get hurt again and he knows it? how does it also show his self-awareness there that he might fall for it again? And because they then have a topic sentence that zooms in on that specific spot and zooms out and connects it to those, abstract concepts of self-awareness and pain, then my kids know that they're going to write a solid paragraph for that.
Love it, love it,
Yeah.
love it.
And the templates once again are up in the corner there in the videos that I have for my question one, and the playlist is up there. Okay. All right, so that brings us to number 3. So, sorry, that's the end of number 3. So this brings us to number 4. What do we have for point number 4, Susan? What do you think?
So the fourth thing that I want to leave you with, the fourth and final thing, there's a little alliteration for you. The fourth and final thing is to think about the end. Think about the end of the poem and think about the end of your essay. I really think the last 2 or 3 lines of the poem, the last sentence in the poem, if you can give some commentary on that, that is a really organic, natural way to end your essay as opposed to just repeating, like summarizing your thesis. Poets a lot of times will build through all of these shifts, and then the last couple of lines, that's where often the boom, this is where one of the main ideas is.
Right, and that's the poet's mic drop right there. That's what it is, right? Here's where we do everything.
Right, and so you have this big kind of, it builds to this like, oh, I see where this is going now. And so you don't want to run out of time and not explore that last line.
Right, that last line.
I also think when you're writing your essay on poetry, if you can pull like 3 to 5 words, a small phrase from that last line, and even if you write a 1 or 2 sentence conclusion, with those words in there, it really is a nice way to wrap up your essay.
Right. And actually, so it's funny that you mentioned that, because I tell my students the exact same thing. If anybody wants, some solid steps and an example of what Susan's talking about right now, you should go to the conclusion video up there in the corner in that playlist for poetry, because I go exactly through this, right? How do you talk about this last paragraph universally and do it in 4 sentences so that you can bring everything here together? All right, Susan, I think this is great advice. I really appreciate that you coming on. Any last words here before I actually just say the final things I got to say every time?
I don't think so. Like, just relax. Like, I think a lot of times, like, people go into writing essays like, oh, I'm worried about, I might not do this right. I might not do this right. But like, this is your opportunity to show what you know. And when we as readers are going to read your essays, like, we are cheering you on. We're not reading with this mindset of, ooh, I want to find something to mark off for. We're reading with this mindset of, oh my gosh, did you see what this student just did here? That's amazing. And I'm always amazed at what y'all bring and what I learned from reading these essays. So just relax, show us what you know. We're excited to see what you've learned this year.
All right, so Susan, let me ask you one other question here real quick. Right, if I want to get in touch with you on the internet, where can I go? I'm pretty sure you've got a pretty awesome website or something like that. What's going on?
So you can find me on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Susan G. Barber. And then I also have this website that I'll link this video to called apliphelp.com. It's really all about English. So even if you're not an AP teacher, jump on that.
But I'm sure that the Susan Barber is going to help just about anybody, right? All right. So I really appreciate you coming on here, Susan, right? And just for everybody else out there, right? If this video is helpful for you, we're going to ask that you just click like and subscribe. Why? Because that's the easiest way to help the Garden of English, okay? We have a bunch of affiliate links. You'll see some pictures popping up all around us pretty soon for the companies that we are indeed affiliated with. And those links are right down below. The Garden of English does indeed sell t-shirts and posters. We do have a Shift Happens poster, by the way. Maybe I'll try to get a picture of that like popping up in here when I edit this video. And also, please note that we are active on Facebook and we are active on Instagram, so we ask that you come check us out there, right? Susan, it's always a pleasure, and I really appreciate your time here today.
Thank you.